Welcome to Patty's Aquatics. So in today's video, I want to talk about a couple things. One I want to talk about is duckweed, that nasty, fast-growing weed of a plant that many hobbyists cannot stand. I want to talk about why I finally want to try to eliminate it from my fish room and how I plan on doing it. I also want to talk about aphids, which are a little annoying bug that can come in from outside or from house plants and live on the surface of your aquariums. I want to talk about how I got them, how I plan on getting rid of them, and how that kind of correlates with the duckweed, so stick around. All right, so let's talk about duckweed and why I have started to finally decide to eliminate it from my fish room. Well, let's start off by saying that I never bought duckweed initially for my aquariums. I bought other aquatic plants, floating plants. I believe they were redwood floaters from a long time ago that had them on them and introduced them into my aquariums. Now, as you can see, like with this tank, there isn't much in there right now because I already have been starting to get it out of there in a lot of my tanks to get a start on it. So it's going to be a process. But that being said, I use duckweed to my advantage over the years. It's very cool plant for starting up these no filter aquariums and sucking excess nutrients out. So there's nothing wrong with it completely in my book, other than it really snuffs out the light and it can get so thick, and the maintenance on it is just incredibly annoying to the point where I just was getting sick of it. So my thought was I wanted to start getting it out of my tanks one by one, start scooping it out and scooping it out. So what I've been doing is using just standard old little net. Now I could use a big one and make it much easier. And I'm just going in there every couple days here and just scooping out what I can and getting it down lower and lower. So there's barely any in here. Now, barely any in here is not going to be enough. This is a plant that grows so fast, you need to eliminate it completely to eliminate it from your aquarium. So my thought was, after I got it down to barely nothing in these tanks, I'll use like a turkey baster and just start sucking up the little last particles I can see one by one until they're gone. But you also have to worry about all the stuff that could be stuck on the sides of the glass in the back. If you can see that, you know, if that gets wet and there's anything living on there, it can start to reproduce. You can see the stuff that's on, actually, like the stuff that's at the surface of the water, like this is pearlweed or like algae or java moss that gets all stuck to it. You got to get it all off of there, or it's going to reproduce again and it's pointless. So I want to get rid of it mostly just because for a few reasons. One, like I said, it snuffs out the light. It gets so thick, the maintenance is ridiculous. But I love to be able to see the fish from the surface of the water. I haven't seen that in how long. Now, this tank is cloudy because it's still balancing itself out. But these rice fish at the surface is just really cool to see them come up. It's really cool to see that. I haven't seen all that for years. I've always had duckweed in these tanks, so thick that you would never see anything from the top. And I'm really starting to like that. And it also was with feeding your fish as well. You know, you'd throw it and it's all on top of duckweed, and then you got to sit there and stick your fingers in it just to try to get it down through the duckweed for the fish to eat. So that was another annoying thing too. So, you know, I was watching Father Fish had a video on duckweed just the other, well, it's a couple weeks ago now since I seen it. And it just so happened I was doing this all the day that video came out. And my friend Maul over at Aquarium Delirium, he also put a video out of duckweed on that same day. So I thought it was completely and utterly coincidence, but awesome that we all were kind of thinking the same thing about eliminating duckweed. Now, another reason I hate duckweed, especially with my puffer tank here, is it would get so thick, and I have a wave maker in here to kind of help push water past the heater a little bit, but it would get so thick over here, like the duckweed would come down about that thick, it would just pile on and pile on and pile on, and it would cut the light out so much in here as well, which I really hated. Now, another part of the duckweed, which I'm seeing in this tank, this is my Oscar tank. Like I said, I've been eliminating from these tanks already. Now, this is something else. This is like a tiny duckweed. It's not the same size, which is very strange because I seen this in one tank probably like 2 years ago. It was my first dirted tank. It showed up in there out of, I don't know where or where it came from. It was isolated only in that aquarium, and then it just vanished over time, and I've never seen it in here. till I started removing duckweed from this tank. Then all of a sudden this popped up, this tiny, tiny stuff, which goes right through the little holes of the net that I use. So this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge to get out of here. So I'm going to have to figure that out. But those are all the reasons why I want to get rid of duckweed, but there's more, and that's going to transition over to those aphids. So let's take a look over here at this 55 gallon I set up. Now I'm going to show you exactly what these aphids are and what they do. Now, if you can see all these little things on the lily pads, those are little aphids. What they do is they can come in from inside or from outdoor plants, and what they do is they live up on your floating plants at the surface of the water, and they'll reproduce. What they do is they suck like the sap and juices out of any plants that are at the surface of the water. Then they'll breed up there and stay on it and continue to live and thrive in these areas. So from what I read, they're asexual, so they can actually, one female can reproduce and reproduce and reproduce, and you can get infested very, very quick. And that's what happened in my aquariums. It was probably like 3 years ago when I first had my first summer tub, and I brought some of the plants in and my lilies with the lily pads in. They got introduced into my fish room, and then all of a sudden I started seeing them in every single one of my aquariums. And they live on the top of that duckweed. They live and they thrive on it. So that's how they've been surviving in my aquariums for so long. So not only can they produce asexually, but from what I read, in the winter months when they get cold, then they can move into actually sexual reproduction, where they'll lay eggs and they'll go on like that. So there's really no stopping them from producing that way, but there are ways to kill them. Now, some ways are, you can, like with these, I'll just take it and go under the water and they'll fall off, and then you'll see fish start to try to eat them all. But that's like a never-ending process, because you take them off of there, the fish don't eat them, they wind up just getting right back on the floating plant and surviving. Now, other ways to try to get rid of them are, I've read you can use like a low dosage of peroxide in a spray. I have tried that in the past. I really didn't see much of a difference in it. So the other thing, which is why I'm getting rid of the duckweed, is you eliminate those floating plants. You eliminate the things for them to survive on the surface. So by doing that, by getting rid of all this duckweed, that should hopefully start to eliminate them as well. Now, the problem being, like with tanks like this one, where I have this big hump of like pearlweed and your Ludwigia and stuff that are at the surface, if you can sort of see that, I don't know if I'll be able to show it up on camera, they can all live on the top of that then. I'll show you a better example. So if you can see closely on the top of these plants that are sticking out of the water, that's what they'll live on then as well. Like I said, I'm taking the majority of the duckweed out of here, but then they just thrive on any little piece of plant that'll stick up out of the surface. Now, what happens is, from what I read, is actually if the food sources start to deplenish, they start to be able to grow wings and fly. And that's when they'll fly to another source and fly to a new tank and go look for another food source. And from there, if the population gets too big or the food sources are gone, then they'll fly to another one. See, you can see right there, I have them as well. On top of there is the little pieces of Pogostemma stellatus octopus that's sticking out of the water. They'll sit there and they suck the juices and the sap, the liquids out of the plant to grow and thrive. And in turn, it can harm your plants a little bit, but from everything I've read, they're really not that disastrous to them. Then of this tank too, once in a while, I'm seeing them hop around the surface here and there. And this one barely has any duckweed, but I have lots of Ludwigia and stuff that are at the surface. So that's going to be the next thing I really have to worry about is, yes, I can eliminate all the duckweed, but these things, I'm really going to have to be diligent on making sure like my plants are below the surface of the water. Other ways I've done it is basically in the past, like I've had them in this tank in the past. I just trimmed this one to kind of help, but they would stick at like, say, the top of this piece of dorsage, and I would just crush them and then put them in the water, and that'd be another way for the fish to be able to eat them. So aphids, they are not, they're pretty much harmless. They're more annoying. They, like I said, they can ruin some of the tips of your plants and eat them, but they can be eaten by the fish. You can crush them, but it's really hard to get rid of them once you have them, especially with setups like my own, where you have lots and lots of floating plants or plants that really come out of the surface. So this isn't going to be an overnight solving problem with it. I got to eliminate the duckweed first. That's going to be my number one thing, and that should cut down the numbers of these guys. But like I said, then I really got to be diligent on the surface of the water here and really try to get them down, because you see, like I said, they're everywhere. I mean, I can crush them and then they become food for the fish. But like I said, they keep coming and they keep coming. So aphids and duckweed. So that's why I want to get rid of my duckweed, for two factors: to help solve the aphid problem. Also, like I mentioned before, so I can actually see inside my tanks from the top again, not only for feeding, but just the enjoyment of being able to really look at your fish from the top and the surface. Like I said, I haven't seen that in such a long time. But again, duckweed, as much as a bad thing that it's made out to be, as rapid it gets, it is very beneficial for some things. It is very beneficial for like these no-filter aquariums, and for setting up tanks, of pulling out nutrients in the aquariums. They can be really good for that. But there are different type of floating plants that can help with that as well, that aren't such big nuisances and maintenance, time-consuming plants that you can still use. And that's my goal long term, is to get rid of the duckweed, trim these plants down, try to resolve this aphid problem, and then trying to find some other floating plants to try to introduce into my aquariums that could be a little better. Now, duckweed itself, there's giant duckweed, which I've seen before. That would probably be even better if you do like duckweed, because it's bigger. It'd be easier to manage and maintain, and easier to take out of your aquariums compared to this little stuff where you get one little piece like that, and in a couple days that'll be like 30, and then it'll be more and more and more, and before you know it, this tank is completely full. And that's how it was with every single one of my aquariums. Every week I had to take a net, scoop some of it out just to kind of maintain it and get some light back in. Because if you look at this aquarium especially, now you see, and I mentioned in other videos, the dwarf sage leaves that are dyed off in yellow in here. Some of it's from the duckweed, from being so thick on the surface, cutting out light. It's also my dwarf sage when it grows too long and tall and covers the surface of the water. It looks cool, but it cuts out light to the plants. So it's another big thing too. You got to kind of keep that in mind. The fact that when it cuts out light, it's also going to potentially harm your plants, just because there's not a lot of light going to them, especially if they're plants that need a little higher light. So, well, that's why I'm trying to eliminate duckweed from my aquariums. I just want to say again and make the point that I do not hate duckweed. I think duckweed has its purposes. I just feel like there are many other species of floating plant that can do the same job as duckweed and makes a lot less cleanup and maintenance from it. So that reason is one of the main reasons why I'm trying to eliminate it. But again, with those aphids, I feel like it's very beneficial to also remove it in order to try to get rid of those things completely, so then I can move on to a different species of floating plant. So that being said, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And also remember, I am offering memberships to my channel, so hit that join button if you're interested and want to join the family. And always remember to think outside the box and take a step back into nature. I hope to see you next time here at Patty's Aquatics.